Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's the 18th of September, 2025, and we're here as usual. I know a lot of you come here to be talked off the ledge. Today, we just have to kind of like face reality about what has happened in the last 24 hours. And honestly, since the Charlie Kirk event last week, because what we're seeing is a completely unprecedented crackdown on freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And the removal of Jimmy Kimmel from the air, which we're going to talk about in detail because there are both legal and political implications attached to it, is a new low. And there's no way to avoid that, deny it, or pretend it isn't happening. So we've got to talk about what it indicates and also a few other things related to independent media and free speech. And I've got other things I need to talk about here, too, because it's not like any of this has stopped rolling on. Those of you who were here yesterday, by the way, noted that I said that usually when Trump's out of the country, it gets a little slow. And as soon as I said it, I apparently jinxed the entire timeline. So my apologies for that. But, this is where we are. Okay, so here's what happened. Yesterday evening, we learned that Jimmy Kimmel has been removed from the air indefinitely at ABC. The parent company of ABC is Disney, okay? So there is already a mass consumer boycott underway. Believe me, I understand for those of you who are parents of young children, this is incredibly difficult, but I did what all of you should do, and I canceled my Disney Plus subscription this morning. I talked to my kids about it. The only thing that is going to have an impact on Disney itself, and this goes, by the way, for other platforms that have capitulated, is to come at them with your buying power, okay? It is incredibly important right now that they get the message that what they have done is going to hit their bottom line. It is literally the only thing at this point that could make a difference in this scenario. So I want to urge everyone first and foremost to take the action that you can take and use the power that you have and cancel your subscriptions. Hulu is also under that umbrella, all right? You can live without Bluey. You can live without Marvel movies. You can live without The Bear. Trust me. And it's incredibly important that we speak with our dollars on this. Okay, so here's what happened. Jimmy Kimmel made a comment on his show 2 nights ago to the effect that the Trump administration was weaponizing the killer of Charlie Kirk, and pointed out that there was information that seemed to indicate that the killer was actually MAGA, which is true. He's not the only person that has said that. I've said it. Lots of other commentators have said it. And he made the point of saying that they were using this to crack down on the left, essentially. I'm paraphrasing what he said. It was 2 short sentences. That alone was enough to catch the ire of the FCC chairman who called for Kimmel to be removed. That then resulted in Nexstar, which is a branch of ABC, like a distributor of ABC, to say that they would no longer broadcast Kimmel. And then within a matter of minutes, ABC announced that Kimmel was being removed from the air indefinitely. There is no question of any kind that this is state repression of speech. Okay, now I want to make this clear because there were a couple of lawyers running around last night saying, oh, well, if ABC made the decision independently, they did not. And I'm going to tell you one of the things that I'm really curious about here, if and when Jimmy Kimmel sues, because by the way, he has a contract, is whether or not discovery is going to show that there were direct communications, which would not surprise me because they were going back and forth about this on social media, between the FCC and Nexstar and other distributors and ABC Disney itself, okay? Again, I have to remind everybody that any state-based repression of speech is a violation of the First Amendment, okay? So they may be dancing around this one with like, oh, ABC made an independent decision. I'm going to tell you right now, it sure does not look that way, okay? Also, yes, Jimmy Kimmel has a contract. Yes, somebody pointed out on the Patreon feed this morning that they haven't fired him. They just removed him from the air. I am going to tell you that the terms of his contract are going to have to be extremely specific if they're going to try to use this as a way to slide in through that loophole. All right. Nobody knows what's in that contract. I'm going to tell you right now, I highly doubt that that contract permits this. Again, like contracts usually have morals clauses, which are usually for like, you get arrested for murder, they can take you off the air. Okay. Saying something adverse to this administration is not something that would ordinarily be something that would result in this kind of action. And we're going to have to wait and see what Jimmy Kimmel and his legal team and his agents decide to do here. But I'm telling you right now, this is not something that looks like it's on the up and up. And they are going to make excuses. But the celebration of this administration and what they were able to achieve, I'm just going to mention, by the way, the FCC chairman has more or less said that they did this on purpose for, we did it for you, Charlie. That in and of itself is like exhibit A to not only a contract violation case, but probably a First Amendment allegation as well. So, we're going to have to see how this all plays out. But at this point, I don't see any way that this actually is legal, because I don't know what's in Jimmy Kimmel's contract. We'll have to see. But the First Amendment violation strikes me as pretty obvious. So one of the things that we also have to talk about here is the rampant capitulation of major media platforms to Trump, because ABC, it was a matter of hours between when the FCC chairman called for Kimmel to be removed and ABC did it platform wide. All right. And there's reporting this morning that there were these urgent meetings where they were like, oh, backlash, not a backbone among any of these executives. One of the things that, we have to consider here is what this means for media and the distribution of information generally. Okay. And I have to point something out. They are not first, right? Like we know that CBS, which by the way is owned by Paramount, you should know all of this, has capitulated, right? This is how Colbert was removed from the air. This is why, all the noise about what they're doing right now with their news branch and Barry Weiss and all of this is directly relevant. Right now, we have an enormous consolidation of media under the control of oligarchs, okay, under the control of billionaires. And the result of that is that they are silencing speech and silencing reporting that challenges the administration. And, again, the way that we can deal with that as consumers is to speak with our buying power, okay? But the capitulation is something that I don't think the rapid capitulation, right, is something that I don't think anybody exactly predicted. You know that, media control is one of the fundamental tenets of fascism. If you've been paying attention, if you've read Jason Stanley's book or Timothy Snyder's work, you know all of this, all right? All that said, you have to ask what comes next, because the thing about this regime, just like all regimes like it, is that the hunger to cause harm and repression and to play the victim and to justify their violence and to find excuses for it is never ending. It is insatiable, okay? So they're not going to be satisfied with Kimmel. They're not going to be satisfied with Colbert. They're not going to be satisfied with ABC or CBS or anybody else bending the knee. They're going to keep coming. And so what does that mean next? All right. So I have to remind you all here, because we've talked about this periodically, that SUBSTACK is co-owned as a major investor, Mark Anderson, who, by the way, is in bed with Larry Ellison, as we discussed yesterday, in acquiring TikTok. Again, one of the things that I have to point out here is that it is not just like big media conglomerates like Paramount and Disney that are at issue here. They are coming for platforms that have aggregated progressive political commentators, okay? And this is something, and that includes TikTok, and it includes Substack. And one of the things that, everybody who is consuming independent media, who values independent media, needs to think about right now is what's going to happen to the people that you rely on right now for truth, for reliable analysis, for motivation, for that talking off the ledge. Again, I know that's why a lot of you come here. What's going to happen to us when they come for YouTube? Because I'm just going to tell you something else. We had reporting yesterday that Google, which is the parent company of YouTube, provided information to ICE. We know that one of the primary owners of Google's parent company, Alphabet, was at the inauguration, made donations to Trump's inaugural fund. What's going to happen when the Trump administration starts putting pressure on YouTube to remove progressive commentators from the airwaves? It is coming. What's going to happen when SUBSTACK, which by the way has never been profitable, needs another cash infusion? What is going to be demanded of it from the billionaires when that happens? And I will tell you that I am extremely concerned about the consolidation of so many progressive figures on Substack, given what we already know about their willingness to platform hate speech. So once again, I have to remind you all that there are ways in which you need to be thinking right now about like how you're going to support independent media. You know, one of the things I said this morning on Blue Sky, I'm going to repeat it here. Patreon is one of the few platforms that has actively deplatformed hate speech and far right-wing commentators and has refused to profit off of hate speech. That's one reason why I am particularly glad that we started with them all the way back in 2018. You all know I did this broadcast free for 18 months before we set that up. We started with them a long, long time ago, and they have had the back of progressive commentators, not just me, but like Chapo Trap House, which is an enormous, what is referred to as the dirty left podcasting platform that has been there from the beginning. Patreon has supported us as left-leaning commentators, has actually built out intentionally things that we have asked for to retain us on that platform. So one of the things that I want people to think about here is that you have to be very mindful about where you're putting your dollars right now when it comes to subscribing to independent media. Because never say never. I've been wrong about some things before, but I will tell you, I do not think Substack is going to be able to sustain what they're doing right now, given their investors, right? And, you've got to think about how you're going to stay in touch with people if, God forbid, something happens with regard to how YouTube decides to start skewing the algorithm so that people like me and others cannot be seen. So, I'm not here to make a sales pitch. I'm here to do my job. But I do want to remind you all that, like small commentators like me survive on things like Patreon subscriptions. And if you are here every day and you are listening to everything that I am saying today about like the threat to independent media because these conglomerates are owned by billionaires who are kowtowing to Donald Trump, you should think about how you can support us to keep going. And I will remind everybody, it's linked in the chat today. We're running a 20% promotion right now off of annual subscriptions at patreon.com/resistancelive using the code podcast. You can go do that right now. Okay. But the thing I will tell you is that you've got to be following people in more than one place, and you've got to be following them on platforms that at least for now, are safe. Because the aim of this media consolidation follows a very specific pattern that also took place in Hungary under Viktor Orban. They are consolidating media to crush it. They are consolidating progressive voices on certain platforms, Substack, so they can crush it. Substack has a deep potential to go the direction of Twitter. And a lot of people over there are not talking about it because Substack has given them cash to come over there and set up shop. That's one thing, by the way, that these big reporters who left places like CNN and MSNBC are not telling you. They were directly paid by Substack to go there. You have to ask yourself why. And, I know we can all say, oh, it's capitalist aims, but I got to tell you, the consolidation over there right now is really troubling to me. So, one of the things that I just want to suggest here is that, as with others who have big YouTube followings, who are on other platforms where, you may be concerned about the freedom of their expression, creation, content going forward, you should think about following them in other places. Private email lists, platforms like Patreon, where you know that the ownership has positive intentions, right? Make sure that you are connected in other ways beyond these oligarch-owned platforms, because the reality is that as all of this continues to devolve, they're going to be coming after the voices that speak against the administration in new and ever more excessive ways, all right? So Kimmel is a canary in the coal mine. There have been many others. Someone on Substack last night said so many dead canaries, and yet we keep mining. Accurate. And again, I want to just make absolutely sure that, people are taking the actions they can take, because we are not totally powerless. Like, again, this is something that I say to you guys here every day. We are not powerless. There are far more of us than them. If Disney is decimated, if their subscriptions drop by 30, 40, 50% because of this, they will be forced to respond in a way that maybe gives them a little bit more courage in the face of this administration. All right. Their weakness is disgusting, frankly. And they're not alone. You know, I mean, I just have to point out that no less than Dick Durbin was out yesterday saying the opposition is not our enemy. They want to kill trans people, wipe immigrants off the face of the earth, and they're not your enemy as a leader of the Democratic Party. Are you joking? Right? Like, we have to be very clear right now that what we need is a consolidated and precise opposition party and a consolidated and precise resistance, like built by like every single one of us, right? You can't opt out at this point if you care about the future. So, you know, we have to take Kimmel for what it is. And again, we're also going to have to see what the courts do with this. Somebody on the Patreon feed this morning was like, Elizabeth, can you promise us that the Supreme Court will do the right thing? No, I cannot. It would be great if I could wave a magic wand and say the Supreme Court is going to make sure that the First Amendment stands up. We have, you know, had so many boundaries fall with this Supreme Court that I'm not going to make any prediction like that on the air. What I will tell you, though, is that this looks like a direct First Amendment violation to me. And there will be debates among the legal commentators on the air about whether or not that's accurate. That's fine. Great legal minds can differ. But no one can tell you that they're not going to get a free pass on this. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is that, you know, we were going to talk about one other thing they did yesterday. Even when we say to you they can't do that legally, that doesn't seem to really be a bar anymore. All right. So I have to talk about the other thing that Trump did yesterday, which was essentially like, this is not the first time he's done this, by the way. So this one is one where I'm simultaneously like aware of the escalation and also like kind of like, you already did that. He essentially is saying that he's going to declare Antifa, which is a non-existent organization, more on that in a second, a terrorist group. Okay. First of all, there is no law in the United States that allows you to designate a certain group of people as terrorists. Okay. That doesn't exist. Second of all, when the FBI and the DOJ, functioning as independent bodies, which they are not right now, have particularly raised issue with certain groups acting in terroristic ways, what that has meant is that those organizations have been the subject of investigations, right? And, you know, one of the other things we have to consider here is that in those instances, like let's just take Al-Qaeda, there's always like a designated leader. There are identifiable people that you can, you know, say are in that leadership, right? There is nothing like that. This whole Antifa thing is like a made up mythology. All right. And by the way, I just have to say, as somebody whose grandfather fought the Nazis in World War II, I find it particularly offensive that the idea of being anti-fascist, the idea of saying, I believe in the rights of all humanity, that concentration camps are bad, somehow makes you a terrorist. Like, let's just see that for what it is. It is incredibly thick propaganda. All right. But all that said, one thing that I just want to point out about this is the danger of what they are suggesting here, which again, they legally can't do. Okay. I have to make this really clear. It's not going to stop them, is that they are now, because it's so nebulous, because it's not a group that actually exists, they are now going to say, you are Antifa, and therefore I have a right to prosecute you, kidnap you, round you up, stick you in a camp. And they could do that to any one of us. So again, one of the things that they are trying to do with this designation is suppress resistance and change. They are trying to keep people who actually care about building a better future, who care about fighting fascism, who believe in the rights of everyone to be free and to have justice and equity. They want those people shut up. They want us scared, right? And so this is the moment where I have to say to everybody that, like, you have two choices in the face of a bully. And fundamentally, like, that's what this is. Okay. It's also like a mafia extortion racket. Like this whole thing of like Jimmy Kimmel should pay money to Charlie Kirk's estate is extortion. That's what they're trying to do. Okay. You have two choices. You can either cower and concede like ABC has done and like CBS has done, in which case the bully is just going to come asking you for more. Or you can essentially say, fine, if that's your position, I'm going to keep speaking up. And, you know, again, everybody has to make their own determination on this based on their personal risk assessment. Some of us are under more threat than others right now. That's very clear, right? Some of us are already being rounded up and put in camps. So, you know, the thing that I have to say to everybody here is that you should not be scared into silence at this moment, right? That is what they are trying to accomplish. You do not have to give it to them. And, you know, from where I sit in relation to this, like, I kind of don't have a choice at this point. I've been out here being who I am for decades, but I've been out here being outspoken and doing this work and, training leaders to be activists and organizers now for the better part of 10 years, right? And so there's not really any way for me to kind of shut up and cower and hide, even though like everybody else, there are moments where I'm like, that would be nice, right? I was just talking to a fellow activist of a friend of mine this morning over Signal, where literally we were both like, it would be great to disappear somewhere for 6 months and not have to think about this shit, right? But that's not possible, okay? So, fundamentally, I want folks to kind of consider that the point of this is to terrorize you into submission and silence. And you get to decide whether or not you're going to give them that. But just remember, if you give them that, that's not the end of the deal, right? You will not be any more protected or any more safe by shutting up, because they're going to come for everybody, and they're going to come for people kind of indiscriminately. Right now there are categories, but eventually it's going to land at everybody's doorstep. And so, if you see it through that lens, you might as well fight back and fight for a future that you actually want, and fight to protect people who are marginalized and particularly vulnerable, and fight for a better community where you live, right? Those are the things that are required right now. What is required is extreme courage in the face of violence and threat. And it will not be everybody who can do that. That's okay. But the people who can't do that, the people who actually are afraid, who are hiding in their homes because of ICE raids, who are afraid of being separated from their children who were born here, they're counting on us to not cower and hide, because they don't have any choice, right? So, this is my moment to just tell everybody who watches here that, you got to put on your big person pants, for lack of a better way of putting it, and decide how you're going to be remembered, and whether or not you're going to look back knowing you did everything that you could do, and whether or not you're going to be able to look yourself in the mirror. Because I know that, not just for my kids, but for all kids, I want them to have a better future. I can't sit down on the job. I can't allow myself to be terrorized into silence, come what may. And, there are lines in the sand, and this is one of them. So we have to see it for exactly what it is. We have to know that it will get worse. And we have to decide nonetheless that we're going to stand for what's right. It's really quite simple. So that's my rant for today. And, I will just tell you all, by the way, that everybody should have Jimmy Kimmel's back. There needs to be incredibly loud resistance to this, and dollars, voices, all of it. My hope is that we see actors and writers and directors and crew walk off every Disney set, that we see unions refuse to work, that we see people actually step up and use the people power that they have. Because the other thing is that Hollywood listens to money. I mean, again, like all these major conglomerates listen to money. It's like the only thing they listen to, okay? But this is not a moment to give them what they want, okay? So that's my rant for today. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. Please support independent media. It doesn't have to be me. It would be great if it's me. Again, you can head on over to Patreon and subscribe. But please do your part, because, again, this is coming knocking on everybody who's out here speaking the truth. And it's incredibly important that you remember that, particularly for those of us who do not have 5 million followers or are making $3 million a month on Substack, because there are people who are doing that, you understand that your subscriptions are what allow us to keep doing this work and feed our families, because that's true for me. Your Patreon subscriptions are, what keep this broadcast afloat, full stop. So do your part, please. And, put your money where your intent and your mouths are. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I'll be here tomorrow. There will be a bonus weekly broadcast tomorrow for our Patreon subscribers only in the afternoon. And I will see you all here regular time tomorrow. All right. Hang in there, people. Backs up, chins up. Let's stay strong in the face of all of this. All right, everybody. Bye. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.